There is a type of patience born from hatred, a silent waiting that doesn't forgive, doesn't forget, and never abandons its purpose. In biblical history, few examples are as disturbing as that of Absalom, son of King David, who waited exactly 2 years to execute his bloody revenge against his own brother. What drives a man to plan someone's death, someone of his own blood, for so long? What crime could be so terrible as to justify, in Absalom's mind, a meticulously plotted murder over 730 days? And why, despite being the son of a man after God's own heart, did Absalom choose the path of taking justice into his own hands rather than forgiveness? This story reveals the darkest side of family relationships in the palace of Israel's most beloved king. A tale where brotherly love was replaced by calculating hatred that had enough patience to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Behind this bloody plan lies a question about justice that few understand. When the law fails to protect the innocent, how far can someone go to ensure evil doesn't go unpunished? The answer we'll find in this story is as disturbing as it is revealing about human nature. These events took place around 1000 BC in the royal palace of Jerusalem. Imagine an ancient city built on hills, with white stone houses clustered in labyrinths of narrow streets. King David's palace stood majestic at the highest point, its polished stone walls gleaming under the hot Middle Eastern sun. The kingdom of Israel was at its peak. Neighboring nations feared its army. Merchant caravans brought riches from distant lands. But behind the imposing palace walls, the royal family concealed deep conflicts like any ordinary family, only with far greater consequences. David, the warrior king who defeated Goliath, was now father to many sons from different wives. This was a common practice among kings of that era, but it created inevitable rivalries between half-brothers competing for attention, privileges, and especially for the chance to one day occupy the throne. Among these sons were Amnon and Absalom. Amnon was the firstborn, first in the line of succession. Absalom was the third son, known throughout Israel for his extraordinary beauty, and especially for his hair. Scripture records that he cut his hair only once a year, and when weighed, it came to more than 4 pounds. There was also Tamar, Absalom's full sister, described as a young woman of rare beauty. In the culture of that time, unmarried women of the royal family lived in separate areas of the palace, protected and rarely seen by men who weren't their closest relatives. Israel was no longer a confederation of tribes. Under David's leadership, it had become a centralized monarchy. The king was both military leader and supreme judge, responsible for administering justice. When a crime occurred in the royal family, it was up to the king himself to judge and punish the guilty, even if they were his own children. This system created an obvious conflict of interest. How could a father be an impartial judge of his own children? How could he balance paternal love with the responsibility to apply the law equally to everyone? It was in this complex setting that the crime occurred that would trigger one of the most calculating acts of revenge recorded in biblical texts. An act so heinous that it would forever tear the family fabric of David's house, creating wounds that even time could not heal. It all began when Amnon developed an unhealthy obsession with his half-sister Tamar. This wasn't simple admiration for the young woman's beauty. The biblical text describes it as a desire so intense that it consumed him day and night, leaving him physically ill. Amnon confined himself to his quarters, refused food, and visibly wasted away. His deteriorating appearance caught the attention of Jonadab, a cousin and close friend known for his cunning. When questioned about his condition, Amnon confessed his fixation on his half-sister. Instead of discouraging such forbidden feelings, Jonadab devised a plan for Amnon to be alone with Tamar. He suggested that Amnon pretend to be seriously ill and asked the king to send Tamar to prepare special food in his quarters. The plan worked. David, concerned about his firstborn's health, sent Tamar to care for her sick brother. The young woman, unsuspecting of his true intentions, went to Amnon's quarters and prepared special bread as requested. When they were alone, Amnon revealed his true intentions. Tamar desperately resisted. She begged him not to commit such a foolish act. She suggested he ask the king for her hand in marriage, a remote possibility, but one that would at least follow some socially acceptable protocol. Her pleas were useless. Physically stronger, Amnon grabbed Tamar and brutally violated her. In an instant he forever ruined the innocent sister's life. But what happened next reveals Amnon's truly disturbed character. His obsessive desire instantly transformed into disgust. The biblical text describes how he came to hate her with a hatred greater than the sick love he had felt before. He violently expelled her from his quarters, ordering a servant to throw her out and lock the door. For Tamar, this public rejection was a second violation. In the culture of that time, a violated woman had no future, no marriage prospects, no social standing. Now, in addition to physical and emotional trauma, she would also face social exclusion. Tamar tore her colorful garment, symbol of the virgins of the royal house, covered her head with ashes, and went out crying aloud, publicly expressing her grief and dishonor. She sought refuge in her brother Absalom's house, who immediately perceived what had happened. Absalom's first words to his devastated sister were surprising in their apparent coldness. "Be quiet now, my sister. He is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart." There was no real comfort in these words, only a command to keep silent about what had occurred. But those who knew Absalom could see something more in his eyes. Under the calm surface of his words, a storm was beginning to form. The biblical text simply says that Absalom hated Amnon from that day, a silent, contained hatred that didn't reveal itself in immediate words or actions. Tamar came to live as a desolate woman in Absalom's house. Her life was socially over, her dreams destroyed, her honor irreparably stained. Each day that Absalom saw his sister in that state, his hatred for Amnon grew like a malignant tumor in his heart. When King David learned what had happened, he was furious, but he took no concrete action to punish Amnon. No sentence was pronounced. No justice was done. The firstborn potential heir to the throne seemed to be above the law. This absence of justice was the final catalyst for Absalom's revenge plan. If the king wouldn't deliver justice, he would take it into his own hands, but he wouldn't act on impulse. He wouldn't attack driven by momentary anger. His revenge would be served cold, carefully planned so there would be no possibility of failure. Absalom waited, patiently. 1 month passed, then 6, a full year. During all this time he behaved normally toward Amnon. He showed no anger, made no accusations, revealed no hatred through hostile words or gestures. This capacity for dissimulation was frightening. While meticulously planning his brother's death, he maintained cordial relations with him in public. He participated in the same banquets, the same religious ceremonies, the same family gatherings. 2 full years passed since the violence against Tamar, 2 years of silent planning, 2 years feeding a hatred that was now mature and ready to be executed. The opportunity arose when sheep shearing time came, a period traditionally celebrated with feasts. Absalom owned property in Baal-Hazor, near Ephraim, and decided to hold a great feast there for all the king's sons. First he went to his father and invited him to the banquet. David refused, claiming that his presence would cause excessive expense. Absalom insisted, but the king maintained his decision not to go. Then, with apparent innocence, Absalom made the crucial request, "If the king cannot go, at least let my brother Amnon accompany us." David hesitated. Why did Absalom specifically want Amnon's presence? Had he finally forgiven his brother for what he had done to Tamar? The text suggests that David suspected something, but yielded to Absalom's insistence. All the king's sons went to the banquet, including Amnon. Before the feast began, Absalom instructed his servants, "Watch when Amnon's heart is merry with wine. When I say strike Amnon, then kill him. Don't be afraid. Haven't I commanded you? Be courageous and valiant." The banquet proceeded as planned. Abundant food, plenty of wine, music, lively conversations. Amnon ate and drank until alcohol diminished his vigilance. It was then that Absalom gave the signal. His servants attacked Amnon as instructed. It wasn't a quick or merciful death. Before his horrified brothers, David's firstborn was struck repeatedly until his blood mixed with the spilled wine. What is rarely told about this story is that Absalom's revenge followed a specific pattern found in the honor codes of the ancient Middle East. When a woman was violated, the responsibility to restore the family's honor fell on the closest brother, especially in the absence of action by the father. The 2-year delay wasn't just to avoid suspicion, it had a profound cultural significance. In the customs of the time, the mourning period for a loved one often lasted a year. The second year represented the period when life should move forward. By acting after 2 full years, Absalom was symbolically declaring that Tamar's life could never move forward, while her attacker lived. The choice of occasion wasn't random either. Sheep shearing festivals were traditionally times of justice and settling accounts in ancient Israel. References to other biblical episodes show that this time of year, when shepherds gathered their flocks for shearing, often coincided with the resolution of old grievances. The distant location of the feast, in Baal-Hazor, ensured that Absalom would be in his own territory, surrounded by loyal servants who would follow his orders without question. The property was far enough from Jerusalem that there would be no immediate intervention from the king's forces. The invitation initially extended to King David wasn't just a courtesy or strategy to avoid suspicion. It was a veiled challenge. If David attended, he would be in a position to prevent the revenge, but would also be forced to confront his own failure to deliver justice. His refusal to attend was interpreted by Absalom as tacit permission to act. The specific request for Amnon's presence, when David declined the invitation, was formulated to appear as a gesture of reconciliation. If my father the king cannot come, at least let my brother Amnon, the firstborn and heir, come with us. This apparent respect for Amnon's position in the family hierarchy made it impossible for him to refuse the invitation without appearing arrogant. Even more revealing is the fact that Absalom didn't kill Amnon with his own hands. He ordered his servants to do it, remaining physically distant from the act itself. This wasn't cowardly behavior, as it might appear to modern eyes, but a legal strategy within the judicial system of the time. By not personally shedding blood, Absalom created a ritual distance from the murder. In many ancient cultures, including Hebrew culture, whoever killed directly was subject to blood vengeance by the victim's relatives. The order given to the servants was formulated as a judicial sentence: "Haven't I commanded you? Be courageous and valiant." This was the language of a judge pronouncing sentence, not a common murderer. The immediate reaction after the assassination reveals another rarely discussed aspect of this story. The other king's sons present at the banquet, each mounted his mule and fled. Mules were royal mounts, symbolizing princely status. By immediately fleeing to Jerusalem, the brothers demonstrated that they recognized the almost judicial nature of what they had witnessed, fearing they might become accomplices or next targets. A rumor quickly reached David, claiming that Absalom had killed all the king's sons. This exaggeration reveals the climate of intense fraternal rivalry that existed. It was plausible, in people's minds, that Absalom had eliminated all competitors to the throne in one stroke. When the truth was established, that only Amnon had been killed, David's reaction wasn't one of complete surprise. The text suggests he quickly connected the death to the violence against Tamar 2 years earlier. His failure to deliver justice had created the vacuum that Absalom filled with his private vengeance. After the murder, Absalom fled to Geshur, where his maternal grandfather was king. This choice of refuge wasn't accidental. By seeking protection in the house of Tamar's grandfather, Absalom symbolically reinforced that he had acted in defense of his sister's honor. He remained there for 3 full years, a self-exile that served as ritual penance for the bloodshed. During this time, the biblical text says that the spirit of the king longed to go out to Absalom. This enigmatic phrase suggests that despite the gravity of the crime, David understood Absalom's motivations on some level. As a father, he condemned the murder. As king, he recognized the failure of the justice system that he himself presided over. The story of Absalom and Amnon is rarely presented as a reflection on justice systems, but that's exactly what it is at its core. When official institutions fail to protect the vulnerable and punish the powerful, justice tends to be sought through alternative, often violent means. To discover more fascinating stories like this one, which reveal the human and spiritual complexities hidden in biblical narratives, all you need to do is subscribe to the channel. Each episode unveils new layers of meaning in ancient texts that remain relevant for understanding the ethical and moral dilemmas of our own time. The story of Absalom's revenge against Amnon transcends its historical context and confronts us with universal questions about justice, power, and family responsibility that remain as relevant today as they were 3,000 years ago. When official systems of justice fail, especially in protecting the most vulnerable, the consequences rarely end with the initial injustice. An uncorrected injustice generates cycles of violence that can extend for generations. We see this clearly in the sequence of the story. Absalom's revenge didn't end the cycle of violence in David's family. On the contrary, it initiated a chain of events that would culminate in his own rebellion against his father and eventually his violent death. The hatred that began with Amnon's crime grew like a cancer, consuming the royal family of Israel. This narrative makes us question the balance between institutional justice and family loyalties. David failed as king by not punishing his firstborn son. He failed as a father by not protecting his daughter Tamar. This double failure created the vacuum where Absalom's revenge found justification. Absalom's 2 years of silence also confronts us with the corrosive nature of harbored resentment. While outwardly maintaining cordial relations with his brother, inwardly he fed a hatred that consumed his soul. This dissociation between appearance and inner reality reflects a universal human problem. It's notable how Scripture doesn't present either Absalom or Amnon as one-dimensional characters. Amnon isn't just a villain, but someone consumed by a sick passion that destroyed him. Absalom isn't simply an avenging hero, but a complex man whose love for his sister and sense of justice mixed with wounded pride and personal ambition. Tamar, the true victim of this story, remains a symbol of countless women silenced throughout human history. Her voice was stifled, first by Amnon's violence, then by Absalom's command for silence, and finally by David's lack of action. Her fate, living as a desolate woman in her brother's house, echoes through the centuries. The story ends without satisfactory resolution for any of those involved. There is no happy ending, only tragic consequences that multiply over time. This absence of clean resolution is precisely what makes the narrative so true and relevant. When justice fails the most vulnerable, there is no revenge that can truly restore what was lost. Tamar's life wasn't returned to normal by Amnon's death. David's throne didn't become more secure. Absalom's soul didn't find peace. The true power of this ancient story lies in its honest recognition of human complexity. There are no simple solutions for the deep wounds caused by family betrayal. There is no satisfying revenge for the violation of trust between siblings. There is no possible return to lost innocence. And perhaps this is the deepest lesson from this ancient account, that we must build systems of justice that work equally for everyone, regardless of power or position. That we must actively protect the vulnerable before harm is done. That we must confront evil directly, rather than allowing it to grow in the shadows of silence. For when we fail in these fundamental responsibilities, we plant seeds of violence that will inevitably germinate, growing into cycles of revenge that consume not only the guilty, but also those who seek justice through equally violent means. This story challenges us to ask ourselves, what happens in a society when institutional justice fails? The silent calculation of Absalom reminds us that when formal systems break down, people will find their own forms of justice, often with consequences far more devastating than we could imagine.